going on? Voodoo here. I am joined by Dave, who is next to me.
Hello.
And welcome to another episode of Voodoo's Verdict, which is my game review series. And this is the first one I've ever done with somebody else, so it's kind of a cool thing. Today, we're going to be talking about a game that was released, I guess, about 3 weeks ago.
Roughly.
And it is Dead Space 3. And Dead Space 3 is the very first time in the Dead Space series that you can play the game full co-op. And that's what Dave and I did, so that's why he's here with me, because he's going to share some of his thoughts about the game as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the game, the gameplay of it, and then we'll start getting into the stuff that I like and didn't like, and we'll bring Dave in and get his opinions on some of this stuff as well. So Dead Space 3, of course, is the sequel to Dead Space 2, and it happened sometime after the events of Dead Space 2. And we pick up where basically the Unitologists, which are the crazy radical religious group around the marker, have kind of become more prevalent. And we run into Isaac, who's living on a colony on the moon now. And basically, without spoiling too much of the plot, he gets wrangled into this big operation where the Earth government, who is kind of in shambles at this point because the Unitologists have been launching all these attacks and have been portraying them as the bad guys for experimenting with these markers and trying to, shut them off. Basically the last remaining unit of EarthGov wrangles him into this operation where they believe that they found the home world of the markers, and they're going to go there and basically destroy all the markers and end it. And of course, things as usual don't always go according to plan. There's a lot of twists and turns that happen throughout the plot of the game. But without spoiling anything, that's basically the general idea, is that you're going to the home world to end all of the craziness and to destroy the markers. So, again, the game is co-op, which I play with Dave, and there is no single-player co-op, or, I'm sorry, there's no split screen, is what I meant to say, co-op, local co-op. It's only online. But your co-op partner is John Carver, who is played by Dave, and he is a new addition to the Dead Space series. He's part of this last EarthGov unit, and the two of you embark on this mission, and the gameplay is a little bit different. The mission structure is definitely different than the previous two Dead Space games.
It's much more action-oriented.
Yeah, and for the first time, you have optional missions in the game. So you might pick up like a key card somewhere, or hear an audio log that will start an optional mission where you can go there and do this short little mission and get some kind of bonus at the end. Some bonus items, some minerals, some weapon parts, and all that stuff, which we'll talk about. And there's also some specific co-op missions that you can only unlock by playing the game co-op, which focus on Carver
And his psychosis and his backstory.
Right, because you'll remember Isaac, when he was going through this stuff for the first couple of games, he was having hallucinations, kind of losing his mind with being exposed to the marker. Carver's really never had this before. This is his first experience with these markers, and so he's going now through the same things that Isaac did before. And it's pretty unique and interesting, because when you do these side missions, which Dave and I feel are probably arguably the best parts of the game,
right,
you'll see something on Carver's screen, like you'll see what he's seeing in his head, on his screen, and Isaac will just see normal stuff on your screen. So what were your opinions on these side missions, since you were the one that actually did the Carver mission?
I thought they were the scariest part of the game, and not necessarily scary, like horror-esque, but more creepy. Like, there was one, I believe it was the second co-op mission, where it was like a birthday party set up, to where he would see like coffins, where I would see big like birthday gifts, and stuff like that, where, it was, what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I think it was definitely a cool aspect. I think there's some negatives to it, which we'll talk about later, but But
one that you didn't see any of it.
Yeah, because the Isaac screen didn't see any of this stuff. It was only on Carver's screen where he would see all this crazy stuff happening. But apart from the missions, there's definitely different parts of the gameplay that haven't been there. Probably the biggest addition to the core gameplay is the weapon crafting system in the game, where, as before you just had the standard weapons. In this game, you can completely customize weapons, and you can actually craft new weapons based on resources and minerals that you pick up. You might be able to take your plasma cutter, and you'll have the normal plasma cutter as an upper tool, and for a lower tool you might be able to install like a machine gun. And then later on you might find a mod for it that adds acid damage to all of your shots. So as you're shooting them with these normal shots, they'll also be coated in acid, and it will do damage over time. And there's all kinds of different things, customizing shotguns with line guns, or, all kinds of different stuff. Putting a flamethrower on stuff. We made some crazy guns.
There were a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, it was very customizable, and you would find blueprints along the way that would let you craft full guns already. Like, we had one gun called the Mjolnir, which was this chain lightning gun that you could shoot. And there was another gun I crafted later in the game, which was like a combination between the Ripper gun from the last couple Dead Spaces with a flamethrower attachment. So that's probably one of the biggest things. There is no more store. There's no more credits. You can't go to a store and purchase items anymore. You find all these items and you can craft them at the weapon bench.
And no more power nodes either.
No more nodes. You find upgrade circuits, which you'll find stuff that when you first start in the game, it'll be like +1 reload or +1 damage, and you can assign the circuit to the tools of your gun. Later on in the game, you'll unlock better ones like +2 damage and +1 reload in the same circuit. So that's how you upgrade your guns. You can't, you don't use nodes to upgrade your rig anymore. You use, again, resources you pick up to upgrade your HP and air and stuff like that. You can craft ammo, med packs, and all that kind of stuff, so there's no more purchasing things at the store. The suits, you can't purchase like better suits now that give you more armor or more weapons or more item slots. You get new suits unlocked for you as you progress through the game that are tailor-made to the specific things. So
what are
like,
you crazy about?
Yeah, so like when you're on when you first get on the cold planet, it unlocks a suit that you can put on that basically keeps your heat in, so you don't freeze to death. But it doesn't really give you any perks. You have to upgrade the suit. Other than that, it's just more kind of what Dave said earlier, action-y based gameplay, to where it's not all, walking through narrow corridors and fighting necromorphs. Although there are parts of the game like that. There are other parts of the game where you'll be doing a lot of action-oriented stuff, like, crawling up mountains with a zip line, or, you can combat roll in the game now. You can fight some humans and stuff like that in the game. And more or less, that's kind of the breakdown of the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of the gameplay of this game, and what kind of things you'll be doing. There's really almost like two halves of this game, where for the first half, not really half, but for the first portion of the game, you'll be in like space above the planet, and the gameplay is really kind of different, because you'll be hopping from like shipwreck to shipwreck doing missions and stuff like that. And then when you actually get on the planet, it's different, because you'll be running between different buildings, running through the blizzards and stuff to get to different buildings to do missions, so it's a little bit different. But that being said, we're now going to get into the things that we both liked and didn't like about the game, and I'm sure that Dave and I will have some varying opinions, which is good. That's why he's here. So let's start off with the positive things that I liked about the game, and then we'll ask Dave things that he liked about the game. The things I liked about the game: I like the co-op aspect of it. I'm a big fan of saying that you can almost make any game better by having co-op if you do it, if it's well done, and if the game, if co-op fits in. And I think for this game it did. I think it made the experience more fun, because you have somebody there with you who you can joke around with, and it's just more fun playing games with friends most of the time. You get the optional Carver missions doing the co-op, stuff like that. So I like that. I did like the fact that there were optional missions in the game. It made the game longer, and it gave you an incentive to go do these things to get better resources or upgrade circuits, weapon parts, things like that. Um, and you know, I did like the carver missions quite a bit. I did like the ability to craft these different weapons, to have all these different kinds of guns, because you really, you know, it keeps you into the game as far as like, okay, I found a new weapon circuit, I found a new weapon mod. Let me get to a bench so that I can see what kind of crazy thing I can craft. And I had a bunch of different guns that I was trying out throughout the course of the game. So there were quite a bit of things that I did like about the game. So what were some of the positives for you?
Probably the bench was my favorite part, because I remember a few times we talked about, you know, our certain combos where you would have the quicker guns like the machine gun or the Ripper Blade that we talked about, and I had the joiner he talked about, with this gun that I guess I could call a grenade launcher. I don't remember the exact term of it, that basically destroyed everything. And that was pretty cool. I liked the co-op missions because the Carver ones were pretty interesting, because it reminded me of, like, it brought me back to the first Dead Space, or maybe the second one more, in the idea of just feeling helpless, because you'll notice if you play in the last section of his missions, you basically kind of go into your own head, and not to spoil anything, but I'm fighting by myself and he's fighting by himself basically to protect me, and I think that was pretty cool, how it did kind of have a sense of loneliness to that it was just basically me, and that made the game harder in some aspects. And I kind of liked how like with the ice planet, the snow, it varied. Like the first two games, while not complaining, it was all in one space station mostly. And the second one had the snow world, and you are still in space, but it definitely branched out, which I like too.
Yeah, and the weapon combos were pretty cool, like you saw talking about. Toward the end of the game, he had this cryo blaster gun that would like freeze enemies, and I had a plasma cutter with a machine gun attachment, so he would freeze the enemies, and I would go around and just start spraying them all with my machine gun and murder them all. It was great. So those are the things that we liked. Let me check the time just so I have an idea of kind of where we stand with that. All right, good. We're we're at a good time, about 12 minutes. So now I want to kind of get into the things that I did not like about this game. And I think people might be surprised to hear some of these things that I don't like about the game. Now keep in mind, before I go into this stuff, that I am a very critical gamer. I look at all games with a very critical eye, and I'm picky when it comes to stuff. So keep in mind that a lot of people probably aren't like that. There's a lot of people who, you know, things might annoy them or whatever, but they just look past it and it doesn't really bother them as much. So just keep that in mind, that I'm really kind of being nitpicky. So it might not be the same thing for you, but these are some of the things that I found with the game. And we'll get Dave's opinion on each thing as we go through. But I think that there's actually a variety of items I need to touch on here. But
please go ahead.
Let's get some of the big ones out of the way. The first big one, the problem that I really have with the game, is I really found the writing of the game, more than anything the dialogue of the game, to be painfully bad. And I'm talking about like extremely shallow dialogue, really just boring, not insightful stuff.
Mushy.
And for the most part of the game, okay, because it kind of focuses on, you know, Isaac and Ellie, who are now romantic, or who were romantically involved, but now she's involved with this other new guy to the thing, this Captain Norton with the EarthGov, and you all are on this mission together, and it seems like for the majority of the game, the dialogue, every time somebody would say something, it would be Isaac and Norton fighting like a couple of children about Ellie. Like, Norton would be like, oh, well, she's my girl now, and Isaac would be like, shut up, I hate you, or something. And that was like the dialogue of the whole game, and you're like, what is this? Like, you're on this epic mission to try to save, basically, humankind from being transformed into these crazy necromorph aliens, and the substantial conversation is about how the two of them fighting like immature high school children about this girl that's not even important right now, because if you don't finish the mission, none of it's gonna matter.
That Isaac really loves.
Like, it's just, I don't know. And I didn't find the voice actors for a lot of the characters to be very good. The main voice actors I found to be good. Like, Isaac's voice actor comes back, and it's not their fault that they had bad lines. I mean, they don't write the lines. The writers write them and say, here, say this. So they did. I'm sure the voice actors did the best that they could do with the lines that they were given. Like Isaac's voice actor and Ellie's voice actor, of course, they returned from previous games. They were good, and some of the other ones were, but some of the voice actors for like the audio logs and some of the newer characters, were just not good.
Like the assistant, like Ellie's assistant.
Yeah,
I couldn't stand
just
her.
Not good at all. And the writing, I just thought was terrible. And like they didn't explain stuff very well a lot of the times. And then the thing that I'm not gonna spoil anything obviously, but the thing that really just set me off the edge was there's a secret ending at the end of the credits. So you have to watch through the credits to see the real ending of the game. It is the most copped out, horrendous, cheap ending I've ever seen. Not ever, because I've seen other endings similar, but definitely one of the cheapest endings I've ever seen, and it just drove me absolutely berserk how bad and copped out of an ending it was, and it was just not good. Like, I just don't feel like the writing of the game was good, in my opinion, at all. Like,
ending bugged me.
It didn't seem like they had the same writer from the first two, because I thought the first two were written well, and this one just wasn't at all, and it bothered the crap out of me. So, anyway, moving on from that, another problem was there were sections of this game that were just terribly designed and badly programmed. And it's not the whole game, but it's some parts of this game. One in particular that Dave and I probably wasted almost half an hour doing was this stupid part where we had to rappel up this cliff face with rocks and stuff falling, and you had to stasis them and climb up to avoid being crushed.
That was not made for co-op.
It shouldn't have been made, period. Because the problem was that you had to stasis these things at the exact right time. Like, there was no give at all. No room for error. You had to stasis these things at the exact right time in the exact right order to get by them. And God forbid that you get, like, close enough to that you possibly touched one of these items, even when they're in stasis mode, so basically not moving, you would die instantly. Like, your body would explode.
Like, if you were rock and I was ice connected to that, you'd be dead.
You just explode. And the problem is when you're doing it co-op that both of you have to get up to the top at the same time. If one makes it and one doesn't, you have to redo the whole thing, and it's terrible. That was one part. One part we were doing an optional mission. Yep. It wasn't anything special. It was just one of the normal optional missions where you get loot at the end of it. The final boss room was the hardest part of the game. Like, the ending of the game held nothing to this final room of this random optional mission where they just sent wave after wave after wave of enemy at you, and it was just unbelievable. You would just murder all of them, and then, like, more would just start coming, and it was ridiculous how long it took. And that was hurt by another big problem with the game, which we're about to get to. But, I mean, parts of this game, I don't know what they were smoking.
It was
I just don't know. It was badly programmed.
And sometimes there wouldn't be many necromorphs, and then there'd be 6 out of nowhere, and you couldn't do a thing about it.
It was just, and like some part, like, they just decided, okay, it's co-op and you have better weapons, so here's what we're going to do for combat. We're just going to throw as many of these things at you as humanly possible and enjoy.
Good luck.
You know? So that's another problem. Another huge problem, which hurts things like these badly programmed parts of the game, are the horrendous checkpoints. The checkpoints in this game are awful. Remember that in the first 2 Dead Spaces, there were manual save stations that you could go to and save. And you knew, obviously, when you saved, where you were, and you knew when you could quit. If you wanted to quit, you went to a save station, saved, you were done. In this game, there are no save stations. It's auto-saving.
I don't know why they took that out in the first place.
And, not to go on too long, but just to give you an example, we did one of the Carver side missions. And we had done basically the whole mission. We were at the final fight in the final room of the mission. Well, my battery was about to run out and I had class, so I had to go. So we ended it right there. When we came back, the checkpoint was at the beginning of the Carver mission. We had to replay the entire mission to get back to where we were. And it's just like, what? There wasn't one checkpoint the whole time, and it fools you because it says there's an option that says save and quit. No, it saves your inventory. It doesn't save your progress. It saves what you have in your inventory. And it doesn't tell you that. So the first time you do that, you get boned. And so in these terrible parts, like the part that we talked about with that optional room at the end, when they just keep swarming you, if you die, you have to redo the whole room.
And there were 3 rounds to that final
Yeah,
room.
at least 3.
And if you die in the middle of the
and
second
they were
one...
the hardest, most annoying enemies in the whole game, and they would just flood you with them. And if you die, redo the whole mission. It was just really bad.
It's painful.
So those are really the big major complaints I have. I have a lot of other minor complaints that I'll brush through briefly, such as the fact that like the backtracking and the loading in the game is just horrendous. Like every 2 steps, there's a door. You'll go through a door, take 3 steps, there's an elevator that it has to load. Get out the elevator, walk across the room, there's another door that you have to load, and then 2 more elevators, and it's just like, oh my god, there's no flow at all.
No. Elevator after elevator.
Elevators, elevators, elevators. And you just it's almost like they only designed like 3 real parts, 3 real areas of the game.
Like, when I say I think we went in the same room 6 times for like different missions.
Easily. Like, we did like 3 optional missions where we went through the same parts. Like, we did 3 missions, we went back, and we're like, we've been here already.
This
like,
looks really similar.
Times. So, that was pretty bad and cheap in my opinion.
I agree.
Things like, I thought that the weapon crafting interface was clunky. I didn't really think that it was very user-friendly. Like, there were some parts where you would go switch out a mod on your weapon just to like try it. I remember very early in the game we unlocked a special enhanced plasma cutter because we had save files on our systems from playing Dead Space 2. So we unlocked a special plasma cutter for doing that, and it had, you know, the normal shooting thing, and the other tool, so to speak, was the rotator module that let it rotate. Well, Dave, early on, he was just testing it out, so he exchanged the rotator module for a different kind of mod, and he decided he didn't like it. So when he went back to put the rotator thing back on the gun, it was gone.
Never came back.
Permanently. It vanished permanently. And that happened for a few different things. It just vanished. And you're like, what? It just vanished. So it was clunky. Now, I kind of give them a little bit of a pass on it because it was the first time that they ever included anything like that in the game. Although there's been a lot of games with modding that they could have used as a blueprint to make it more user-friendly. They chose not to do that.
Well, what bugged me is that with all the new guns you can make, you only had 2 weapon slots.
Yeah, I was about to forget that. All right. Well, I'm scared this is going to run out, so I'm going to cut it real quick. We'll come back, finish up, and give our scores. So you'll see a little jump cut here, and then we'll be back. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. My camera has this filming limit, and I didn't want to go over it and have the camera turn off. So, yeah, just to follow up on what Dave was just saying about the weapon slots, yeah, in Dead Space 1 and 2, you had 4 weapon slots. In this game, you only have 2, and it's like backwards.
Right, exactly.
Because they're I mean, the main focus of the gameplay of this game is the weapon crafting, the weapon modding. You have tons of different weapons and opportunities.
Like 30, at least.
But you only have 2 weapon slots. So you can't even really test, you can't even test guns out, because if you had 4 slots like the previous 2 games, you could take at least 2 guns that you know you're reliable with, and then the other 2 you could substitute guns in to try out, and if the other 2 guns sucked, you had 2 guns that you were reliable with. In this game, no. Like, there's only 2 slots, so if you pick a gun and it sucks, good luck. You only have 1 other gun to use.
Yeah. Which is probably going to be the plasma cutter, because just like Dead Space 1 and 2, you're going to rely mostly on the plasma cutter because it's the strongest weapon in the game, in my opinion.
I had the plasma cutter. I used it the whole game. I modded it with that machine gun attachment and put acid damage on it, and it was great.
Yeah.
I tried to use other guns. I made like a shotgun with acid damage, and it was sucking. I tried a lot of different things, and they just weren't as good. Nope. But why they decided to go from 4 weapon slots to 2 for this game, when the whole point was like, look at all the weapons we have, really made no sense to me, and it limited you as far as that goes. But yeah, so unfortunately there were a plethora of things that we didn't really like about the game, but taking all that into consideration, I'm sure there's a couple of little minor things I'm just forgetting that's not really a big deal or anything, but so taking all that into consideration, okay, despite everything that I just went over, the two of us went over that were negative, that we didn't really like about the game. I have to say that overall, my feelings on the game are that it's still a good game. It's better than your average game, for sure, because the game, it took us about, almost 18 hours to beat the whole thing, and we did everything except one side mission that we missed somehow.
Which never popped up.
Now, keep in mind, it took us 18 hours because we had to replay a lot of the same things over and over because they were just those poorly made parts of the game, or they were just brutal or something like that. So I'd say that maybe if you did better than us and you didn't have to replay 100 times, you beat everything the first time, you're probably looking around 16 hours.
Which is good.
16 to 17 hours to do everything. Which is obviously a lot longer than Dead Space has ever been. Dead Spaces 1 and 2 were like 8 to 10 hours long.
It never felt forced, you know? Like,
I mean, yeah, it was good,
I suppose,
variety content. The reason that to me it was getting too long was because I was getting fed up with some of the badly made parts of the game, not because I was like, the plot's being dragged out or whatever. It was because I was tired of doing some of the gameplay, and I was tired of listening to the terrible dialogue every 2 seconds and the cheap things that they did in the plot, which were just terrible. So it's a good length, so it's definitely a good bang for your buck. And there's more than one mode. They have, if you do the co-op, you might want to go back and play it on single player to see how it differs, to get that more isolated feeling that you had in the first two. There is a hardcore mode, which is like extremely difficult, where you get limited resources and stuff like that. And you can only save like 3 times.
And if you die, it's game over.
Yeah, if you die, you go back to the main menu, and you can only save like 3 times. There's a survivor mode where enemies don't drop health packs or anything like that. You can only craft them at the bench. There's a classic mode where you don't have all the weapon modding. You just have the classic weapons like the plasma cutter, the pulse rifle, stuff like that. And it's on a hard difficulty setting, and you have to play it that way. So there's different modes you can play in the game as well. So there's a lot of content here, even though that they took the multiplayer out, which is probably for the best, because I didn't really like the multiplayer Dead Space 2. It felt like they just threw it in there to have it.
Right.
So there's a lot of content with the game. It is co-op. And its overall experience, it's enjoyable. I think that we had a lot of fun playing the game. There was a lot of times when we didn't have so much fun. But it's still a good game. It's not a great game. It's not, in my opinion, anywhere close to the other 2 Dead Spaces. I thought those 2 were way better than this game. I thought Dead Space 2 was the best one in the series.
I agree with you there.
And so, it is what it is. So, saying all that, as far as my rating, my score for Dead Space 3, I'm going to give the game a 7.25 out of 10. It's still a good game. There's enjoyable parts of this game, but there's just too much, in my opinion, holding it back from being like an 8 or better, which in my opinion is a great, terrific game. There's just too many things that add up. If the dialogue had been better, or if there were not these annoying parts in the game, like if 1 or 2 of these areas had been fixed, maybe it would be getting close to an 8. But because they're all there, they all compound, and they all frustrate the hell out of you by the end of the game, I can only give it a 7.25. So I'll turn it over to Dave. He can give you his final thoughts on it and his score for it.
Well, my score is only a little bit higher. I'm going to go with a 7.5, only because what Josh hasn't already said. I think the game lacked some of the horror mood that the first one had mostly, and even the second one had pretty well. That it had the action-oriented style of the second one, but it was just missing that horror feel that made me love the series so much. But it still wasn't a bad game by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I've played some really bad games, and this was not a bad game. I played Crysis 2, I played Brink. I played, what the hell is that other game? I don't even remember now. Syndicate. Resident Evil
6.
Operation Raccoon City. Resident Evil 6. I played bad games. This was not a bad game. And actually, to finish it off, I didn't even really mind so much the direction they went, because I feel like if they had kept it the exact same as the first 2, it would have gotten stale. I wouldn't even really mind the direction of the game. I just didn't like the fact that it wasn't executed well, in my opinion. If it would have been executed better, I really wouldn't have had too much problem with it. If I wanted those nostalgic feelings, I would have played it on classic mode, or gone back and played the original 2 games, because I feel like you do have to evolve a series over time, or else it just gets stale. But I just didn't think that it was executed well. You know, just looking at it without the name Dead Space on it, if it was just the game in a vacuum and you didn't know what series it belonged to, I still just don't think that the game itself was executed very well. So
I agree.
But still a fun game, not a bad game. So 7.25 for me, 7.5 for Dave, so basically almost the exact same score. Those are our feelings on it, so that I hope that you enjoyed our review, the very first Co-op Voodoo's Verdict. I'll have more of these in the future if I do co-op games again with Dave or other people. So leave feedback, let me know what you thought of it. I'm going to try to spruce up this one a little bit, do a little bit of a custom intro for you guys, so that hopefully you'll like the new look of it. Looks a little bit better. So for Dave, I am Voodoo51292. Thank you very much for watching. If you're interested, be sure to go check out our playthrough of the game, which is up in a playlist. And I will see you again real soon. So bye for now.
See ya.